Dr. Bernet, thank you so much for being here. So today I wanted to just kind of focus on three key questions, and these are really focused on the solutions. So my questions are, and I think let's just start at the first one, which is, what are your proposed solution for solving parental alienation at the personal level, for these victims? And why are these proposed solutions have not worked before?
There are so many people who are interested in this topic, and there are many, many different ways to think about it. And I think each of us have different ways. And I know some people who are personally involved have very, very personal ways to think about parental alienation. I mean, my way is more as a child psychiatrist and as a professional, and dealing in the past with children and teenagers and families, and also then doing a lot of custody evaluations. So I guess my interest is kind of on a professional level, and because I've never had any direct personal involvement with this issue, which I'm happy about that. But my personal situation started maybe 14 or 15 years ago and it had to do with DSM. It had to do with the DSM-5 was just being developed and just being thought about. And so several people asked me if I was gonna, if parental alienation was going to be in DSM-5, since I knew that that topic had come up before, and now we have this whole new idea coming. And so I put some thought into it and talked to some people, and I decided that that's what I would try to do. That my personal objective would be to get the concept and the words parental alienation into DSM-5. And so way back, way back before the DSM was published, we started collecting information and collecting groups of people who all wanted to do this. And we published two big papers and then one whole book called Parental Alienation, DSM-5 and ICD-11. We got together with people. The first get together was actually in Florence, Italy. We we were there for a meeting, and several people from Europe, and we all got together and had a conference for several hours, and we had lunch, in the hotel in Florence, and that's kind of what got it off the ground. So that, and then I made formal um, application to both DSM and the ICD, and I felt that we got about half of what we wanted. In other words, we were not totally successful. We did not get the actual words parental alienation in DSM-5, but we did get the concept, and we got three different diagnoses that can be used, and the definitions were in fact tailored to paraphrase the concept of parental alienation. And just one of them is called child affected by parental relationship distress, and one is called parent child relational problem, and one is called child psychological abuse. And so if you actually go to the book and look at these definitions, you can see how the words were picked in a way to 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 simulate or paraphrase the definitions of parental alienation. So I haven't quite accomplished that. I mean, that's still my goal. What I'd like to do over the next couple of years is get material together and documents and publish papers and uh, other types of arguments, other types of research, and once again go back to the people who are in charge of the DSM, meaning the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And there's a whole method for doing this, that there's an ongoing, it used to be the DSM was revised maybe every 10 years, but currently there's an ongoing method for reviewing new information and new ideas and correcting old ideas. And so I think in the next year or so, we'll be able to take this information back to this committee and have them look at it and see what they say. So that's my personal goal, and I realize that not everybody's interested in this. In other words, that happens to be what I'm interested in, and what gives me energy to think about that. And I realize, other people have totally different. I mean, this is something they think is a waste of time, perhaps. But I think there all of us have to choose different paths that help us understand and help us do something about parental alienation.
For the parents that don't understand what DSM is, would you explain what would it mean to the parents, to the families, if this is being added into the DSM?
So the DSM is this book that's published by the American Psychiatric Association, and it has definitions of psychiatric diagnoses. In other words, it stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And, uh, like all these different diagnoses, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or anxiety problems, they're all in this book. And it's meaningful because if parental alienation were in the DSM, it means it would be recognized that there wouldn't be this big argument about it and about the criteria for it. So this actually connects me up to your second question, which I think has to do with what are the obstacles. I think you call it on a not a business level, but an industry level.
Right, yes.
And so the way I see that, the DSM is connected to that because I think what I consider our industry are the professions that deal with parental alienation. And I mean the legal professionals, the mental health professionals, the psychiatrists, psychologists, the social workers, the judges. So we have work to do in that area. And we have done a lot of work. In other words, different people who are interested in parental alienation have had conversations with many, many different judges and attorneys and legislators, for instance. And but what we haven't been able to do is address it in a systematic way. And by that I mean, what are the training programs in this country and in other countries? What are the training programs for psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and attorneys? What these training programs have criteria. They, a psychiatric training program can't just do whatever it wants. There's a whole list of things that psychiatrists are supposed to learn, and child psychiatrists have a somewhat different list, and psychologists have a curriculum. So what we need to do is to get parental alienation into these college and graduate school curricula uh, as a topic that needs to be addressed. And so if we do that, it'll then be, they'll start putting it in textbooks. They'll build it into the schedule, like family law. Attorneys, I'm sure, take a course called family law. They'll build in to several days of talking about parental alienation. And it'll also be in the continuing education activities of these organizations. So that's something we've done in a very, very sporadic way. I was involved in a college here in the South that a couple of years ago actually started a required course. This is a graduate program for family counselors. And they started a required course on, it's on family, I guess family conflict, I guess is the topic, but parental alienation is built into that. So that's this one little university here in Louisiana. And so we've done this in a very spotty way, but we need to do it in a more systematic way. What's holding us back? I mean, it takes time and energy, and there has to be somebody with kind of like with connections to these agencies that create these curricula. So it's something that we've thought about, but we haven't gotten around to. And there needs to be people, hopefully we'll find people who really want to go after this, and we'll be able to accomplish it in the next few years.
What about at the system level? I mean, you address the personal level, the industry level. What about the system and the society level?
I think most people who are in the middle of this agree that family law is a problem. The way family law is worked out, in other words, when people get divorced and there are disagreements about the children, that we have an adversarial system, and almost everybody would agree that that's not a very good system. That it's people say it's broken or it's dangerous or it damages families and children. And so we need to think about other ways to deal with family law issues when children are involved. And some people have put a lot of thought into this, and the main thing that people think about are mediation. It's called um, mandatory, obligatory, structured mediation, where uh, the mom and dad would come together with the guidance of usually an attorney um, who would help them together figure out what the schedule should be for the children, and that this would be required, that if you're going to have a divorce involving children, you would have to go through this. And it's not just one day, it's a series of meetings where people are educated as to how this is really the way to go. And I suppose if it totally fails as a last ditch effort, they would end up in court. But every effort would be made to avoid that. Now, there are legal groups that are already advocating this and have for years, and maybe they'll eventually get this on board in more places. So that's a really big step on a societal level. And the other step is focusing on shared parenting, because almost all the research about shared parenting indicates that when parents have equal time, 50-50 or close to 50-50, that the children do better. And not just then, but 10 years later, the children are better off if they grew up in a home where the parents had 50-50 or close to that in terms of their parenting time. So those are some things that I think are um, possible, but I think it's going to take a cooperation between advocacy groups like people who are interested in parental alienation, and attorneys and judges and legislators, because there's going to have to change the law in many states, um, and on both the state perhaps and perhaps on a federal level. So that's a huge task. But I know people are working on those, on both those, the non-adversarial court and the shared parenting. So that's what we're wishing them the best on those fronts.
Thank you so much. I mean, like, I know that we would talk forever. I mean, I have so many more questions for you. So, anyway, I hope to catch you soon in May. We'll have a much more in-depth conversation. But for today, I really appreciate your input with that. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, thank
Talk to
you.
you later.